I think we're good to go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Los Angeles Film School Presents an evening with the creators of LA, A Queer History. Los Angeles has a history you've never heard before. My name is Rafael Soto. I am a writer-director. I also work at the LA Film School, and I will be your moderator for this evening. I want to introduce the director, Gregorio Davila, our producer, Maria Novoa, and our executive producer, Richard Javier Corral. We're going to hear more from these gentlemen in a little bit, but first, let's watch a trailer of the film.
It was a frontier town, the perfect place for people to come and reinvent themselves.
Because there was so much privacy, Hollywood very easily became a gay mecca.
The industry in Hollywood attracted gays and lesbians because gays and lesbians have always tended to be artistic.
What Hollywood was looking for was sophistication. And, well, wouldn't you know it, the smartest and most sophisticated people were gay.
The cruising scene was fabulous in Los Angeles. There was Pershing Square or Griffith Park.
We had Joni Presents, we had the Pace Setters. There was lots of bars out there.
But if they caught you dancing together, two men, you knew you would go to jail.
Would be at a bar and the cops would come in and say, you're coming with us.
Chief Parker felt that he had kept the mafia out of Los Angeles. He kept organized crime out of Los Angeles. He felt that he could do the same thing with the gay and lesbian community.
We arrested 3,000 homosexuals.
It's about normalization. People could be arrested for dressing as the other sex.
The really dangerous thing for women would be that they would lose their children.
At that time, there were so many suicides amongst the young. It was so sad because their parents, would throw them out. And the only way, that they could live is to do prostitution.
A young man, a young homosexual, had been beaten to death by the Los Angeles Police Department. That was enough for me. It radicalized me.
We have to begin to organize. We have to come together. We have to find out who we are. And I wanted us to be protected by law as any other minority was in this country.
I must stand up for myself and for them.
I got up in my church and said, if I'm going out to demonstrate, you're going out with me.
I remember Harry Hay once saying to me, Stonewall was fine, but to me it wasn't groundbreaking. It was just the East Coast finally catching up with the West Coast.
Right. All right.
Amazing.
Yay.
It's right. That trailer is so emotionally charged. And I can say this, I've actually been able to watch the film already, and you're in for a treat. It's eye-opening, and the amount of information that you people put together within 2 hours it was a lot. It was a lot. I'm sure it was a labor of love. So let's jump right into this. Why don't you each introduce yourselves and what role you played in creating this documentary? We'll start with Gregorio.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Gregorio Davila, the director. What was the other question? I'm sorry.
So what did you do? What was your role in making this film, this documentary come together?
Oh, all right. I'm the director, writer. I edited it as well. Also a producer. And I started this film as just kind of, it was just an idea, back in 2012 or something. And then I did a lot of research on it. I had no idea how I was going to pull it off. I had no resources, nothing. I wasn't in the business at all. still really not in many ways, most ways actually. But and then I met Mario and Richard, and it kind of snowballed from there, and it just became what it is now. It's a big project. So long story short, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to you, Mario.
Yeah, my name is Mario Navoa. I'm an alumnus from the LA Film School, 2000. So I go back 20 some years now. And I'm also a former staff member who was in the film program. I was a manager in the film program with Joe Byron. Yeah, I've been a producer for a long time, and director and editor. Gregorio and I were working on another documentary called Gay Latino Los Angeles, which was my first feature production as a producer. And I met Richard in that same way during that production. Gregorio has a very unique insight into story and his ability to edit. And I had already seen his work, and was already a fan of his style. And then he also sort of became an academic and a historian during this whole process when I first started with him to where we are at today, because he's done the research, he's talked to all the people that lived the history, he's done the work. And I think when I first heard it from him, I was unaware of my own LGBTQ history, specifically here in Los Angeles, where I grew up. And so by way of his introduction into the history and to the style and filmmaking that he was wanting to endeavor, I'm the kind of person that I'd like to collaborate with people if I believe in the vision, even if there's no pay. To me, it's about the art and the creativity, the opportunity. Also to that, being Latino, doesn't really, at the time when I graduated from the LA Film School, there weren't many open doors. I had two mentors in the industry. Well, one in particular, Miguel Arteta, who was a big Puerto Rican filmmaker, and he was a mentor for a period of time. And I also worked with Gregorio Nava at his production company. But the door was so limited then that I just found that we had to create our own opportunities if we wanted to have a title producer. And so when Gregorio presented LA Queer History to me, I was like, let's see how we can make this happen. Let's see if we can do it. It'll be my second film. And I don't know if we could really do it, but we'll try. And here we are, almost 10 years later, but we've gotten this far.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Richard, you can take over.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Richard Corral, and I am the executive producer of LA Queer History. And it's definitely been quite a journey. How I got connected, pretty much Mario and Gregorio have already shared that we had a connection through previous projects and collaborations, and have continued really ever since. I have worked with both Mario and Gregorio on projects that are not related to LA Queer History since we first started to this day. We actually work on side projects. We've done live productions together. We've done content for social media together. We've done small videos for different platforms together, all throughout and while producing and directing LA Queer History, and in many ways even financing the work with the film through other projects that we've all collaborated together. So we've been working together for years. And as a matter of fact, the other day, I have a reel, a collection of videos on YouTube that kind of showcases our work over the years. And I don't look at it very often just because I just don't do it. But I revisited that body of work, and I was impressed, to see sort of where we've come over the years, and Mario helping to produce the live elements, and Gregorio helping to record, the highlight videos of those same events, and so it's definitely been a labor of love, and sort of a symbiotic relationship between all the work that we do. And we've really reached a very exciting sort of apex of our work. And more specifically, as Latino producers, none of us have those typical familial relationships with the entertainment industry. You know, none of us do. And for us to not have those open doors as Latinos, to find ways to work together, to find ways to be compensated for our work, and then to be here and actually just winning, you know, the best documentary at last weekend's Highland Park Independent Film Festival for this documentary. And then on top of that, being engaged just this week, actually, with some exciting news around the next level of this project. It's been, I definitely, no pun intended, it's a point of pride. Absolutely, it's a point of pride.
It's awesome. Congratulations on the Film Festival award. Highland Park, you said, right?
Independent Film Festival, correct?
Fantastic. Yeah, the film, you can tell that you guys put your whole heart into it. And you said 10 years. So, you know, we're film school, and you have a lot of students right now watching this who think about, you know, putting a film together or a webisode or a documentary. Can you walk us through what that entails? How did you start the process? I mean, like, did you make a list of everyone you wanted to interview? Did you put a treatment together first? Just walk us logistically through that process, please. And Gregorio, I'll let you start.
Sure. Yeah, like I said, I just had this idea. It actually came about because I came across this article about the Black Cat riots and the subsequent protests. And then it was kind of highlighting the fact that it came 2 years before Stonewall. And so it got me, kind of went down this rabbit hole about what else is out there that I don't know. And did all this research about LA history, LGBT history, and then the idea of a documentary just popped in my head. And again, I had no equipment. As Richard was saying, we have no ties to the entertainment industry. I had done some work on films in the past and done some art directing and stuff like that, and had a short film in Seattle when I used to live in Seattle and a festival up there in 2001. But I had nothing major, and this was obviously a major project. So I didn't know how I was going to pull it off, how I was going to do it. I just know that I kind of became obsessed with doing it, and I just started doing research. I went to the library. I did just folders and folders of notes. And then I started to make actual kind of a beta version of the documentary with just images that I had put together in my voiceover narration, which is what I presented to Mario. I did about 2 hours of that, actually. So that became my notebook. It was a video notebook. And then Mario was impressed and he wanted to come on. And at that time, he was kind of in the same boat as I was, just fresh out of school, I think. And he didn't have any equipment either. And then he got a grant and got some equipment and called me up and said, I have this equipment, let's start shooting some interviews. So I said, perfect. And I had already had a list of people that I wanted to interview because with my research, I compiled a list. I started reaching out to these people. Everybody, with the exception of like one or two, everybody immediately saw the importance of the project and said, how can I help? And so they were very gracious. We started interviewing these people. And with that, I was able to put together a trailer with the interviews, not just me doing my narration. So it actually looked like more of a formed film. We presented that to Richard. He was impressed. He came on board, and then I had gotten a grant, and that helped. And then Richard helped us fundraise and get to the next level. And as I was interviewing people, it was always like, oh, you should really talk to this person. Oh, have you heard about this event? Or have you read this book? Or have you done this? Blah, blah, blah. So it just the project just became bigger and bigger and bigger, and the story became bigger and bigger and bigger.
Right.
So it just sort of started going on. It sort of started to feel like it was never ending for a while, and then we finished the interviews, and then I started editing, and that process was very, very difficult. I don't know if Maria told you, but the first cut I made of the film was almost 5 hours.
Oh wow, no,
So,
no. Okay.
Yeah. So cutting that down to, I first cut it down to 3 hours, and then I cut it down to 2.5 hours, and then I cut it down to 2 hours, which is where it's at now. And this is about the 25th cut of this version that we have now, probably at least the 25th that I've done. We did run out of funding towards the end, so I did the best color work I could do. I did the sound design. I made it a 5.1s, and so we can play it in the theaters and have a really good sound. So I never went to film school. I didn't have the access to higher education. So I tried, but I couldn't go. I couldn't get there. So everything that I do is I taught myself. You know, I went to the library back in the day, and I also spent many hours at Borders Books. I don't know if anyone remembers Borders Books, but Borders, and then the other one. What was the other one that's still around with an M? I don't know.
Barnes and Noble.
Barnes and Noble, yeah, Barnes and Noble and Borders. And so I went to there, and I would just sit on there, because they used to have little chair, big, like, comfortable chairs you could hang out and read, and I used to take my notes in there. And so that's how I taught myself in the beginning. And now it's like YouTube tutorials. That's kind of the way everyone learns now, and it's always some 12-year-old kid that's teaching you how to do things that they don't know what to do. So yeah, that was kind of the process, and I'm teaching myself, you know, throughout this whole process, you know, how to do certain effects. All the effects that I did were mine, except for we did have some help with a guy named Kane. We did some great work, but it just that's how it snowballed. I mean, and then to get from there, having this idea and having not even a camera, get to where we are now.
Yeah,
I mean, it seems surreal to me. You know?
Yeah, and I want to cut to because we're going to show you guys, the audience, a longer version of the trailer. But before we do that, I want to ask, and any of you three can take it. So, as you had mentioned before, everyone, when they think about gay liberation, you think Stonewall. I'm a New Yorker and very New York centric. So, of course, to me, it's 1969. It's Stonewall. It's June. When in actuality, the Black Cat happened first. So can we talk about a little bit about what happened that night, New Year's Eve, 1966?
I'll let Gregorio take that, because he knows a little bit more about it than I do.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, as far as and it's laid out very carefully by Alexei Romanoff, and very eloquently by Alexei in the film, that it was a New Year's Eve night. There were undercover cops, and at New Year's Eve, you know, you celebrate and you kiss.
Gregorio, really fast, can you let me know where the Black Cat was located?
Sure. It's in Silver Lake on Sunset, right just, I guess, southeast of the Sunset Junction.
Yeah.
So.
And still there, right?
It's still there. The location is still there. They never took the Black Cat sign down, and then it had become different iterations, and just before it became the Black Cat restaurant and bar, it was a really fun queer Latino seedy bar called Le Barcito, where I used to frequent a lot, and it was a really good time. But so then that closed, and now these owners came in, these two straight guys who are really, really great. They bought the space, they heard about the history, and they decided to rename it the Black Cat, and kind of to pay homage to its history. And it's a historical landmark now. And they have pictures actually all over in the restaurant of the protests, and they teach their employees about the history. That way, if anybody asks, that they can impart that history onto their guests. So they're very open, and they're very great about keeping that history alive. And we've actually had several events there, and they've hosted some fundraisers for us, and they've been very gracious throughout this process. So what happened was New Year's Eve, 1966, 67. New Year's Eve hits, people kissed, undercover cops came up and, because that was considered lewd conduct. Just two men, two women kissing was considered, was basically akin to being a sex pervert, So they started to arrest people, and people kind of started fighting back and started getting angry, and then people ran out. The cops followed them down the street to another bar called, I believe, was the Two Faces, I believe, which is where Circus of Books used to be, right on the corner there, right half a block down. They went in there. The police caused havoc in there and beat the owner and the bartender, and it just became this riot out in between two bars and out in the street. And it was kind of a catalyst for the community, and they decided they didn't want to take it anymore. So it took them a month to organize the protest. It happened on February 11th of 67, and it went on for 3 days. They went out every night with signs, and you can see all the photos and everything. They're very famous photos. And they went out and they protested, and it was a very civil, very orderly protest. They were very nervous. The cops were there trying to intimidate them, and they were handing out flyers to people that were driving by, and it went on for 3 days. And I don't think it is the first protest where LGBT people, because people were still afraid to even come out back then. So it was the first protest where LGBT people came out and said, here I am out in the open, I'm gay, I'm not afraid. I could still lose my job, I could still lose my licenses if I'm a teacher, I'm a hairdresser, I'm a whatever. But they came out and they said that we're not afraid, we're gay, and we're sick of this, and it has to stop. And that's a very important part of our history, and I don't think it gets the credit it does because of that. I think they were very brave people to do that.
Yeah, you're right. And for those that don't know, back in the 60s and early on, what would happen when you would get arrested is they would, in the newspaper the next day, there'd be printed all the names of the people that were arrested, and you could be fired for being gay. They could do that back in the day.
They print your name and your address.
So, yeah, we have a lot to be grateful for those brave people. So without further ado, let's go and let's watch this long trailer, and we'll be back right after.
He was standing in the restroom, by the way, good looking, big, muscular, standing in the restroom with his hands in his pocket. And naturally, I noticed him, but I didn't dally because I wasn't about to be arrested. And I walked out, and he followed me. I think I sat down on a park bench, and he sat down on a park bench. We got to talking, and one thing led to another, and I decided he was not a cop, because he was ordinary sounding. And I never suspected that he was sizing me up and waiting for the right moment. Well, apparently the right moment did not come because he got impatient and said, "You're under arrest." And I said, "What for?" And he said, "Making a sexual advance, da-da-da-da." And he grabbed me and into the car we went, and there I was in jail. And by the way, the number I called, the one number you're allowed, you'd never guess who I called. Harry Hay.
And he called me in the middle of the night, and I went on down and bailed him out, and got him out at 6 o'clock in the morning. And this is a Saturday night, Sunday morning when I bailed him out. And I took him to the Brown Derby for breakfast.
He didn't say what happened and tell me all about it. No, he just, our conversation was very ordinary, as if the world had not ended.
And I was listening to his story and what he had to say and what he was going along. I said, Dale, we're going to fight this case.
The tenor of what he had to say was, don't worry, this is what we want.
This is a real entrapment case and we can prove it, I think.
That's not a very comfortable thought to someone whose world has ended. This is what we want. Good God.
The lawyer put a marvelous case together. And at one particular point, I remember he had Dale on the stand. He said, yes, my client is homosexual, and yes, he is a decent, self-respecting American citizen. And we're all sitting in the front row of this thing and had never heard ourselves spoken about like this in public in our lives. And we're just weeping because it's such a wonderful experience to hear somebody else, particularly a hetero, say that about us.
One of my prevailing thoughts was, I'm not alone. Think of all the guys that have gone through this completely alone, entrapped by the cops, got sentenced, paid the fine, or went to jail. And I must stand up for myself and for them.
The lawyer caught the arresting officer in a lie on the stand. And then we caught the jury being tampered with. And as a result of all that, the judge simply said, this is one of the poorest planned cases I've ever seen in my life. It's in shambles, and I will have no more to do with it.
So it was dropped. Walking out of the courtroom free was a liberation that I never anticipated. I never thought this would happen. It didn't happen in our society. You went to jail for this sort of thing.
What it was a victory, and it was the first gay victory we have in the country. This is the very first case of its kind. Nobody had ever fought the entrapment case before. And so we had, in effect, won.
Word got out and Mattachines' numbers grew tremendously.
We were all of a sudden inundated. The news went out all over the country that an entrapment case had been fought in Los Angeles by the Mattachine Society.
There were hundreds of gay people who read that and said, oh, there's a group, I want to be in it. I'm scared. I think I'm going to lose my job. I need to be a part of this.
All of a sudden, you had friends all over the United States. Chapters cropping up we'd never even heard of. There was a consciousness that we'd never had before. The very purpose of getting together was to break a mold, and the only way we could break it was by making another mold.
As they were articulating their ideas about the homophile, they realized they needed a platform, so they started One Magazine.
One Magazine was started by people who were involved with the Mattachine Society. They thought there's got to be a more direct way to reach gay people, not just in Los Angeles, but really throughout the country.
They had staff writers, they had illustrators, they had a psychologist. Homosexual marriage, it was opinion pieces, it was political pieces, it was letting people know about police harassment, it was letting people know about their legal rights, it was talking about the Red Scare, how to protect yourself, how to form a Mattachine society, all kinds of helpful information.
One Magazine was available on newsstands all across the country. It was the first time in American history that a gay person could get a sense of what was going on all across the country. And it was the first thing that said, it's okay. Not only is it okay, it's great. Now, before One Magazine came along, there were these magazines that did cater to a gay readership, physique magazines. These were magazines that were mostly pictures of men wearing almost nothing except little pouches, under the pretense that these are exercise magazines.
In 1951, Bob started a physique pictorial magazine. And the people who knew what it was, really knew what it was and who it was for.
People traded them. They just gave them to each other. Somebody bought them at one point and they passed them around.
physique pictorial and one, I sort of would get both of them.
That magazine continued up until the early 90s.
The color came in and that was a big deal.
And as long as it pretended that it was just an exercise magazine, it could get away with it. One magazine, in contrast, had no racy photography in it, no images that were remotely sexual whatsoever. But what made one different than the physique magazines, and I think more significant than the physique magazines, was just the fact that they admitted they were a gay magazine, that that's what they wanted to do. They used the words homosexual and gay right at the time that it's being persecuted the most. Putting gay pride right on the front of their magazine in 1958, way ahead of the curve, it was very, very important for the people who read it. A lot of the people who read it were in small towns or suburbs where they didn't have access to any kind of gay culture. And it's important to know that gay people had a lot of trouble just finding information about themselves. What does it mean to be gay? How do I deal with this? How do I categorize it? How do I think about my sexuality? And so it was a lifeline for so many people, and an outlet as well. People wrote letters to the magazine, expressing themselves, talking about their problems, asking for help. One published some of those letters. They responded to all of those letters. They really created this intimate sense of conversation, but at a very large national level.
23 August 1960.
November 16th, 1964.
March 19th. 1950.
January 24th, 1956, a suburb
3rd
of
of
Los
March,
Angeles.
1963,
May,
Columbus, Ohio.
1958, 31.
Small town in central Pennsylvania.
Dear Sir.
Dear One. Dear One.
Dear One. Dear One. You will understand why I do not give my name, as I have children to think of.
It's going to be hard for me to put my problem into writing, but I'll try to get all the facts across. You see, outwardly, I'm a woman, but inside I have male emotions. In fact, at times I become two different people. For a while I'm a woman and even act like one, and then all of a sudden I'm a man. Sometimes I get so lonely and depressed I can't bear to go on any longer. I guess this is a lonely heart's letter to you, but you're my last hope. I appreciate you reading this, and because I'm hoping so strongly that you can help me, I'm thanking you in advance. Sincerely yours, Lori.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. There you have it. There you have it. I want to jump right in, and I'm going to give this one to the Richard Amadio. What was one of the things that you were most surprised to learn when putting this film together?
That we had access to people who were actually the activists and the artists. And then being welcomed into their home to conduct the interviews was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. I've interviewed hundreds of people since high school on doing camera video work for news or whatever. And then during the years, just the amount of production work that I've done. But nothing has been as impactful as interviewing these people. And knowing that they were alive and that we could actually listen to history from the people who lived it.
Richard, you.
Mine's pretty straightforward, but also more systemic in nature. The two things that I learned are how Hollywood and the LAPD systematically oppressed, repressed, and at times even worked together to essentially control the LGBT community and to keep them from being recognized not only in the entertainment industry in front of and behind the camera, but also to be recognized for the purposes of humiliation and destruction of their lives. And again, it was a ongoing systemic effort. And really the end result is that you have cities like San Francisco and New York, obviously, that were documented in terms of their contribution to the larger LGBT movement, but through the sort of dual forces of Hollywood and the LAPD, they managed to essentially cover up the history for many, many decades.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. The film kind of opens up talking about just what the police were doing, back in the day. Just a lot of these gay clubs were owned by the mafia, and I wouldn't even call them gay clubs, but were owned by the mafia, and cops would come in and arrest people, and if you pay them enough money, like your name wouldn't appear in the paper, things of that nature. And what surprises me the most when I try to put into context is this wasn't that long ago. Like, my parents were teenagers when this was going on. And I think that if it wasn't for these people that paved the way, like, what would life look like now? Because we don't live in that kind of fear as they did. Yeah. Anyway, let's continue here. So I have a question for Gregorio. Pride. Do you want to, because this is something that I learned that I did not know was pride, where the word pride, how we coined it for ourselves. So I'll let you take that if you want to explain that a little bit.
Sure. Well, like many other things, the word pride came out of Los Angeles. After the Black Cat riots, an organization formed that called themselves Pride. And it was an acronym for Personal Rights in Defense and Education. And they weren't around for very long, but they helped organize the protests, and that term caught on. It's like pride in who you are, pride in what you stand for, pride for your culture as gay people, and that kind of became the name for an event that happens every year, having LGBT pride. I heard this story when I was watching another documentary about the origins of the term man, like, hey man, thanks man. And it came from Black people, Black men, namely, back in the day, as a response from white people degrading them by calling them boy. Say, hey boy. So they started calling each other man. And that's kind of where the term came from. And it's kind of, it's interesting, the origins of these things,
Yeah.
Where pride came from is because we were also being told that we were not full human beings and we were not people. So having pride in who you are, it's very important. And, it still exists today. Yeah. And it's extremely important.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to jump in there real quick, because I wanted just to mention, as Richard reminded us at the screening of the Highland Independent Film Festival, that it is LGBTQ History Month. And so our film was showcasing right at the beginning of the month, as well as Hispanic Heritage Month. So, I just want to highlight the fact that we're Latino filmmakers, that we're celebrating our LGBTQ history. And I know that there's National Coming Out Day too coming up. And that's for all the people who are struggling with their identity to be able to voice who they are, what they're all about. I had my struggles with that too. I'm sure many people have had that. And part of what for the energy behind making this film is to inspire other people to either be activists, to know their history, to know that they can exist in the future, and to fight the power. I mean, it really is, I'm not the kind of guy that's going to get out there with the sign. on the street and protest, but I can make a movie.
Yeah, I get that. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I'm kind of like that as well. And something that you struck upon, because I feel like life is changing. When you look at today's youth, they're just nowhere like how I was as an 18-year-old, like so closeted. I mean, what do we have back then? You can go to a club, be outed, or you can go to I guess it was like Adam back in the day. And nowadays they're just like out loud and proud. And I think it's amazing. You look at TV shows now, and it's just like there's gay couples everywhere. Do you feel that we skipped a beat? Like we went from being, you look at the 90s, post AIDS to now, it's what, 20, 30 years. Do you guys think that there's something in the middle that is missing? And I'll let Richard take that one.
Specifically, something in the middle that's missing from.
Well, in pop culture, just I feel like we went from nothing to everything is just like, okay.
Well, honestly, I mean, it's social media for me. I think social media was the thing that allowed for essentially people who felt alone to be connected, which is something obviously we didn't have when we were coming out. But the version of social media that this film does highlight is one magazine, right? And at the end of the day, what oftentimes empowers people to come out is because they don't feel alone anymore, essentially. They essentially feel that they're not the only one, that they're actually having common experiences with people that they may or may not know. And they're basically inspired to come out because they realize that they're part of a larger community, right? Which is essentially what is a theme that this film covers. Time and time again, people coming together because they realize that they have a common interest. They're being persecuted as a group. They're being connected to people with common experiences, or they're organizing against the police together, or then they're submitting applications and fighting City Hall for the first Pride ever. All of these firsts are things that allow people to realize that they're not alone, that they have common interests, and that together they can move mountains. Although initially it's very challenging. And I think that's really, social media has expedited that process that I just described exponentially. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
100%. I do feel like that. I'm not bothered by it because I think it's important. I think it's needed. I just like when I look at a lot of gay establishments that are closing just because of low clientele, and it's because everyone's so comfortable, just being together because no one is really bothered by it, especially in the bigger cities. And I know for me, like Circus, which you guys talk about in the film, was one of the first gay clubs I ever went to. And I remember the first time I went feeling so safe, just like, oh, wow, these are all like brown and black people and everyone is like me. And obviously now, Circus is gone and Cobra was almost gone. And thank God it was saved during the pandemic. But I just think it's nice that we are accepted and young people are very fluid. But I do think that we still need these establishments that are just for us.
Yeah, agree.
I think, obviously there's still homophobia in the world and there's still issues. But I think a lot of the work that needs to be done now is within the community itself, within like how we treat our enclaves, whether it's trans, Latino people, women, effeminate men, the list goes on.
Yeah.
So, I had that same experience with you. Like I'm the first Latino club I went to was in San Francisco, and I can't remember the name of it now, but it was a really big one, and it's since closed. But I had been out and going to bars since I was, at that point for like maybe 3-4 years. And that was the first time, and I was living in Seattle, and it was, Seattle's pretty white, still is, but at that time even more. But I had that same experience. I walked in, and that same experience that Roland had when he talked about it in the film. He said, I was in heaven. I was like, I felt like this was kind of like a place for me, because I felt as though I had two coming outs. I had a coming out as a gay person, and I felt I had a coming out as a queer Latino person. And they were very different coming outs, and they mean two very different things. And yeah, so I mean, there's a lot more to talk about there, but yeah,
I think I know what you mean, and I don't want to give anything away, but I don't think this is a big one. I don't think you guys will be mad, but in the film, they talk about the nightclubs in the 70s, and Hollywood. There was a club called Studio One that pretty much catered to like white elite gays, and Black people weren't accepted, and that's how Circus came out of a need for that. And I know, like, I'm from New York, and so like when I would go to Chelsea bars, it wasn't the same as when I got to go to Circus. It was just like, it was just completely different. Feeling at home.
To tag on that, I mean, filmmaking feels like that.
Mm-hmm.
I more identify on the filmmaking side than clubbing, because I'm just not I did the club thing when I was younger. I think that's the initiation or the go-to space for queer people. It's a safe space, but for me, it's always been storytelling and filmmaking. But we can't, getting the funding for this film has been challenging amongst any other LGBTQ project out there. But we're kind of we're walking in this space of like telling this historical documentary, this history. Usually we'll not see brown people like us doing that. And then trying to get this film launched, it is a very lonely place. So with Gregorio and Richard, I definitely feel like there's like a brotherhood, a connection, at least, an understanding that there's things that because of our experience, we don't have to read the subtext. We get it. And then we can move forward and do the work that we need to do as filmmakers. So that feels very kind of isolated still.
And I think it really shows up too, and it's been noted during the past 3 screenings of the past 3 weeks that we've had, that it's funny because folks have actually made comments about, wow, this story feels very inclusive, and that it feels like there's a, really an intentionality around representation. And I think the 3 of us sort of kind of laugh to ourselves quietly because, I don't think any of us would allow for this project to proceed without ensuring, that diverse voices are at the table, because essentially, like Mario said, we are trying to implicitly and explicitly address both the disempowerment, disenfranchisement, as well as the removal of the voices of the folks who have not, been at the table. So, implicitly, just by the fact that we are producing, I think we're all committed to making sure that diverse voices are at the table representing the reality of what really, really happened. And then also at the same time, I think all 3 of us are accustomed to being that person in the room, time and time again. Myself, even as an entrepreneur, as a business person, and as sort of the business side of the film, constantly, being the one in the room, whether it's for this project or whether it's, for various business endeavors and projects that I'm working on. Mario did hit it on the head. It's very lonely, but it's also very exciting because you have an opportunity and responsibilities to set the tone and to really be the first person in many spaces and places.
Yeah. What you guys are doing is incredibly important. And well, I, for one, thank you for that. I don't do documentaries. To me, when I look at a documentary, it looks like, where do you start? That's just not my style.
Yeah, I mean, but they don't teach documentary film, or they didn't teach it when I was a student there in 2000. So I was going into the narrative feature track, that was the world that I was going to exist in. But I just didn't factor in that there was opportunity in still being a storyteller and still clicking on the record, button on the camera, being around the microphones and being around lights. I'm proud 20 some years after to be, still struggling, but still making and creating, and then partnering up with people that I would have never otherwise met. But, I think anytime you can create an environment where you, I guess that's the most empowering part about it. If you know how to do it, and get out there and do it, make it happen. And I know that when Gregorio was struggling with, like, how am I going to do this? I'm like, let's just start. Let's, call people we can interview, make a list, write something down. We'll get a camera there. We'll figure out the logistics. And that was us, Gregorio and I, functioning on that level as filmmakers, just kind of stumbling through it, but being very in tune with what we were doing. Of course, we weren't being amateurish or anything about it. And then Richard comes in with his, planning and logistics, and just being a very sound voice in the room for us. So the three of us kind of complement each other in areas where we can factor in our strengths and weaknesses, and when it comes to that. I mean, Rafa, as a filmmaker, you know how problematic it is to start a production. So
yeah, and the big thing is, this goes for the students out there, like, don't try to do it by yourself. Like, meet people who are better than you, that you can learn from, people that you trust, form your tribe, and then go make films and change the world. We got 5 minutes left. Time has completely slipped away from me. So I got to ask you this. What's next for the film? Like, where can we see it? Like, are there festivals coming up? Like, is there Instagram we could follow, or Facebook?
Well, I'll let you know about the social media, and then I think Richard can probably take over what we're doing next. He's more eloquent in that department. But our social media, you can find us, the name of the film, LA, A Queer History, on Facebook and Instagram. And I update that anytime there's any news or any screenings or anything. We're hoping to get another screening in Los Angeles, and we've submitted to a few other festivals in the future, and we'll see what happens. We're trying to get it to a series, so we'll see what the future. We have a lot of things that are possibilities that are coming up that are very hopeful. So we'll see.
Yeah, I know that we are in conversations with the even LA Film School about a possible screening. So we'll see how that plays itself out. And to follow up on a point Mario made earlier, I'm not aware of any school that offers classes on executive production. I could have definitely taken a few of those classes, that's for sure. But to kind of piggyback off of what Gregorio said is we are definitely in conversations with production companies and agencies that not only want to represent us in the project, but really want to take the project to the next level in the next iteration. More specifically, that is really taking the story, building off of it, and potentially sharing it via a streaming platform, one of the major streaming platforms, into a potential either an episodic or a limited series, or a combination, both. So it could be an episodic with a limited series within each episode. Within each season, excuse me.
Would this be like a narrative?
So it would actually be focused more on, since we have, LA Queer History, as season 1. But then it would be another city as season 2, another city as season 3, and so on and so forth. And it would be both domestic as well as international cities. And so that we would kind of take the formula of LA queer history, and the chapters that are outlined are chapters that, frankly, sadly, unfortunately, are probably repeated in various forms throughout various cities over time and space. And so that is something that we're exploring. We're exploring just really how to take this vast amount of information and storytelling, get it to people who need to see it. And what's interesting is the folks who are really most excited about this narrative are really primarily a lot of straight people, are really hungry for this information. So our folks that we've been speaking to are really interested in how do we take it not only to a larger audience, but also to the world.
I love it. I love it. Okay, really quick, 30 seconds each. I want you guys to give advice to up and coming filmmakers. You have 30 seconds each one. Let's start with Mario.
So as the co-founder and president of the LA Film School Alumni Association, I see a lot of young filmmakers, and they always ask me the same question about how to get started. And you just have to start. You have an idea, find the team to work with, put it on paper, put it on a schedule, find the money, and make it happen. The tools are accessible. You can do it.
Thank you for that. Richard.
It's not going to be very exciting, what I have to say, but I think it's extremely valuable and probably not often shared. Get an accountant, get a CPA, get a bookkeeper. It doesn't have to be, talk to them maybe once every quarter, maybe for an hour. I'm not asking for a lot, even once, maybe twice a year, even whatever it is. Get an accountant, get a CPA, get a bookkeeper, somebody who knows something about numbers. It'll save you a lot of money, time, and headache in the long run.
Ooh, I think this is going to be a whole nother panel just about that. Please, Gregorio, take it away. 30 seconds.
Yeah, just you're going to hear a lot of people say no. A lot of people tell you this or that it's not your story to tell or whatever it is, but just hold close to your vision and hold your vision in a positive manner. Tell everybody you can about it. That's what I did. And if you just hold that vision of this of your project, in a pure fashion, no resistance, tell everyone about it, and people will see your passion and people will want to work with you on it, and they'll recognize that it's an important, great project. And if you do that, it will happen.
Thank you. Closed mouths do not get fed, people. Well, I think this is it. This is all the time that we have. Thank you so much for spending this hour with us, guys. Documentary was amazing. I can't wait for all of you to see it. And once again, thank you for joining the Los Angeles Film School. Y'all have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.